First speaker is Mike Garvey.
Thank you all for allowing me to speak this evening. I told John that I'd come back in here the next few months before Connie retires and tell you all about the wonderful things you're doing as a board. But tonight I'm going to talk about Southeast. As children, we make decisions based on emotion, and as adults, we use facts and data. I submit to you that you do not have enough facts and data to make a decision to vacate Southeast High School. I checked with your bond counsel, and they informed me that they do not have drawings for any renovations of the current facilities. I have spoken with most of you, and one argument is that Southeast is landlocked. I have an aerial photo here that shows the 10 vacant acres that Southeast owns just to the west of your school building. Couldn't a drawing be made to show the feasibility of expanding where you are, just like you did with East and North High Schools? It only takes about a week and might help you to make a decision. Again, as I stated last time, there are over 15,000 residents here within 1 mile of this school, and there's only 800 at 127th and Pawnee. If the growth is truly in that direction, where are the people? Where is the data to support this? Right now, the people are here, and that is a fact. You say that the building will not be vacant, but what are you going to put in there? Do you think you can take hundreds of jobs out of downtown Wichita to fill the building? Will the city allow the county to put its emergency preparedness center there? You have said there may be classes there still. However, you have repeatedly said that you cannot afford to staff both locations. How can you staff any classes there if you plan to build a new school? Unless you can say what is going into this building, there are no viable alternatives to keeping it from being vacant. You've also stated you would have community meetings on this issue, yet you have not. And I have been told you will plan to vote on this in the next 2 weeks. Do you have enough input from the community to make a decision? We've had 4 days to get the word out. A movement born online, SaveSoutheast.com. We already have hundreds of signatures on our website and several hundred here in my hand. We're also posting video of this evening on that website. In closing, I'd like to say that you as a board are the most powerful people in the city of Wichita. You have the most employees. You are in charge of our children, and quite frankly, you are in charge of our future. I submit that if you choose to move southeast before answering these and many more questions, you will be making an emotional decision based on your feelings today. Thank you very much.
Mr. Garvey, I want to remind you again, and I think I was misquoted in the paper, as we said last week, we are just starting that process of talking. I don't know where you got your data, but that's what we asked for last time was data, and that's what we're going to start talking about tonight. I also don't know who told you that we were going to vote on it in 2 weeks. There's nothing on the agenda that it's going to be on 2 weeks. So there's no reason to rush it. We're not planning to. We do plan to have a thorough discussion of all those things. Those issues that you brought up, we will be discussing. Those are the questions that we brought up last time after you left. I was sorry that you missed that discussion. So I hope you stay for this discussion and future ones so you do know what we're talking about, the debate and the questions that come up here at this level. So thank you.
Would you like me to take this, or would you like me to leave that?
If you're going to be here, you could leave it here. You might show the, I mean, if you want to turn it around for other people, you can. Our next speaker is David Robbins. Dave.
Board members, I'm David Robbins, and tonight I'm wearing a couple of different hats. I served on the District Advisory Board 3 with James Clendetted, City Council member. I served on the District Advisory Board 5 with Jim Skelton, County Commissioner. So this is where I wanted to take the topic tonight. You said that you might need land, so I visited with the MAPD staff, and they indicated that Pinecrest Street, which is shown on the drawing there, could be vacated if the school board purchased the property to the west of the street. You might also relocate the utilities at your expense. So additional land contiguous to your property is available for a price. For the people, what it means is the students would not have to cross the street to use the additional land, and this is the land that's directly to the west of the school. Number two, I have not heard any discussion about a charter high school. If you're unwilling or unable to operate this building as a high school, I'd like for you to take a look at probably giving us the opportunity to have a charter high school there. That would be a private contractor that would operate the school focused on the technical education that would meet the needs of our local employers such as Boeing and Cessna and Coke and Boeing's leaving town, aren't they? The third one is, how reliable do you think the state of Kansas and the federal government will be over the next 50 years as a funding source? Are you prepared to raise taxes to pay for the busing costs if the bus funds are no longer available from the state? Or are you going to tell the parents they have to get their children to school on their own? And I want to give you an experience that I had as a Park City Council member. I served on the council for 10 years. And we had in our current operating budget funds coming from the state of Kansas, and it was for property tax reductions. That was in our current operating budget. In that operating year, the state of Kansas said that check is not in the mail, and that check is never going to come. And so from my own experience, if we hadn't had a very conservative city clerk that would have put in the budget a sufficient cash carry forward, we wouldn't have been able to meet our expenses in that year. And I want you to take a look at the federal government today, where it's at, the interest bubble that we're all living with right now, and the state of Kansas on their projections on cutting funding. I personally don't trust the state of Kansas as a long-term funding source for this busing. Board members, do you have any questions of me?
Questions? I don't see any questions at this, or did you have one? No. Yeah, I don't see any questions. I don't know if we disagree with your busing or any of the state funding issues. I think we probably share those concerns. We've shared those for quite a while. So it's part of the reason we're in the boat that we're in today. We have $60 million less, operating expense each year from those budget cuts. So thank you. But
thank you.
Appreciate the information. So,
thank you,
next speaker is Verlene Brown.
I am Verlene Brown. I'm with the Apartment Association of Greater Wichita. And as the Apartment Association of Greater Wichita, we are concerned about the closing of Southeast High School. The area in which Southeast is located is highly saturated with apartment dwellers. Some of the apartments are townhomes, some are conventional apartments, and many are tax credit apartments, which is geared towards a lower income family. Many of these apartments are part of an older neighborhood of the city. Almost 16,000 of the residents that live in the Southeast High School area live within a mile's distance from the school. We, as the owners, managers, and employees, are in the business of providing comfortable lifestyles for our residents every day. Part of that comfort is having a school in close proximity to the rest of the neighborhood. In the case of Southeast neighborhood, it's not just a high school, but both Caldwell Grade School and Curtis Junior High that make it so attractive to move to. It's a neighborhood where K through 12 is all within the same block, and for many, all within walking distance. History has shown that when a school leaves a neighborhood, so do a lot of the amenities. Southeast and the neighborhood surrounding it are in close proximity to a wide variety of grocery, variety, and discount stores, pharmacy, restaurants, fitness clubs, hairdressers, convenience stores and malls, and a whole lot more. It seems much more practical to bus the students from the relatively new neighborhood that involves just over 800 residents to the current high school than to force busing on the 1,650 current enrollment of Southeast High to a school which at this point is designed to only serve 800 people. As a Wichita apartment manager, I know firsthand how important those school choices are to my prospects, both to the parents that have to be concerned with transporting their children and to the students themselves. To uproot current students from their lifelong neighborhood school in the middle of their high school career seems unjust. Vacancy in my business is a dirty word, and to those and to the rest of us in the apartment industry. To have several vacant buildings smack dab in the middle of a long-established established neighborhood just seems like crime is being issued an invitation. Please consider these issues when making your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Don Landis.
My name is Don Landis, and I am a member. Southeast High School is my neighborhood school where we live at. And thank you for having me the opportunity to speak to you tonight on this issue. All of Wichita will pay dearly for the folly of closing a good neighborhood high school at Lincoln and Edgemore and building a mega high school 6 miles away at the edge of the school district. We have questions for you. The people who live near Southeast High deserve to have a public meeting so they can speak, that they can attend and speak directly to the school board. They have questions and they deserve answers. When will the school board schedule this meeting? The folks who live in the 127th East and Pawnee also deserve a public meeting also. A mega high school on that corner will destroy the 2-lane roads leading up to that intersection. When will the school board arrange this meeting? Who pays to upgrade the roads on 127th and on Pawnee? It's 2-lane roads. One of them is a dirt road, in fact, 127th East, south of Pawnee. They will not take the traffic that you have planned for that intersection. We talked to the Sedgwick County traffic engineers today, Mr. Brand, and they have not been notified of your plan, your discussions, and they have not prepared a report on the impact of building a mega high school on that corner. Is there a reason why we haven't discussed this with them? They're telling me it's going anywhere from $500,000 to $750,000 on up per mile to improve those roadways. They must be improved on Pawnee from west to east to that intersection. That's several miles that are just 2 lanes need to be 4 lane. Same with 127th. The people in that neighborhood should be invited in to talk about this on the impact of that much more traffic in their neighborhood. Who pays for the busing of kids from a former neighborhood high school to a mega high school 6 miles away? How many kids will be bused? What is the impact on these kids? Will this affect after-school participation and activities? Will it impact the dropout rate of our current high school students who have to be away from a neighborhood high school? How long has the superintendent been working on this plan at taxpayer expense? When did the school board members first learn of this project, and what studies have been prepared detailing the impact of this proposed change? Why does the school board seem to be in a big rush to push this change? Now, I understand, Mr. Rogers, your comments, and I'll modify that to say that you are not rushing this from what you've said tonight, and that's good. I'm glad that you intend to take in the full community's response, and I take that away from what you said earlier, Mr. Rogers. And the public has a right to ask questions and to get honest answers. And we will be holding a meeting ourselves on Wednesday, March 13th to discuss this and to form a committee, a steering committee, to devise a strategy to bring this to the forefront of concerns. And we welcome you at this meeting, of course. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Next speaker is Janice Bradley.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I would just like to say I'm real concerned about the attitude that I see reflected in the school board and some of the decisions, and that is a concern of the lack of concern for the public's investment in these schools. We saw 5 schools closed last year, and all of these buildings, the investments of the teachers, of the parents, for how many years, and then the new schools are opened. With Southeast High, I agree with all the other speakers. These issues of the number of people in the city right now, the kids who walk to school, I just feel like the decision to close Southeast as a comprehensive high school is a cruel decision. That would be a cruel decision, especially against poor people. People who don't have the means to travel as easily to parent-teacher conferences or activities after school. It just seems like such a cruel thing to me, and I really hope that the school board will stop chasing the developers. You look at the Google Earth documents of 127th and Pawnee, and you see that while there aren't roads, what looks like infrastructure that's already been provided by the city, evidently, the sewer department, you see those traces of mains, sewer mains, or water mains, perhaps, but this is already done. There was a school planned for this area. Well, put it off. Wait till the things have recovered and such, and those investments can be more easily made. Don't close a comprehensive public high school that has served this community well. Please, don't go that way.
Our next speaker is Reuben Eccles.
Good evening. My name is Reuben Eccles. I pastor New Day Christian Church. I attended Wichita Southeast and just received an award from them not too long ago, and it is just a part of my history and part of my upbringing here, a wonderful family. And I come tonight just concerned about the trust level that is being, I think, is being depleted in some ways with our school board. I was on the committee working with the school district on the issues about closing the other schools on last year, and there were a number of things that were spoken at those and talked about at those different committee meetings. And one of the things that came out was that there was groundwater that was affecting the closing of Mueller. And recently in the paper here, a quote was given by Kenny Hinkle, the director of design and construction of the district, and he says, everything has been repaired except for the roof. We have no issues, no structural issues. We're aware of no water issues. We took care of those problems 5 years ago. And when I talked to the community about these different issues and about Mueller, I think they went along with it because they said there were issues at the school. But then this comes out and it says that there were no issues at all with Mueller. And so I think folks will, and so now you're telling us certain reasons why Southeast needs to be closed, and I think there is a trust issue that needs to be handled because the community, I think, will not want to go and come back in when you ask for more money for school bonds and different issues, and they say you're going to, why should we trust you again when every time the schools are closed, they're in areas where it's based on the backs of African Americans many times and low income who have to do the moving, go out to, if Southeast is closed, African Americans will again be affected by being bussed out to schools, finding ways to, again, to meet their obligations. And so, again, I think it's going to come down to trust. I'm hoping that you do give a good hearing to the community about this issue. And again, for me, it comes to trust. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Randy Tone.
Good evening, President Rogers, Superintendent Allison, and board members. I'm Randy Tone. As a parent of 2 children in the Wichita Public Schools and a resident of the Southeast area, I feel that the new proposed Southeast Quadrant High School should be built as the new Southeast High School. Over the past few years, I've been an avid supporter of the 2008 bond issue and have co-chaired the Oversight Committee overseeing the 2000 bond completion. I feel that these new facilities add a positive impact to the students' education, and Southeast students and staff should have the same opportunities that all other Wichita High School students currently have with their new facilities. Currently, those empty spaces are just practice fields that they have at Southeast. We can't even host our own football game in this area. Right now, this is all about the kids. If we start now, in about 3 years, Southeast Golden Buffaloes would have a brand new school to move into. The students and staff of the Southeast High School currently deserve what other Wichita high schools currently have. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy.
All right, Southeast High School planned for the 2008 bond issue. You can see we're 4 general classrooms, a special ed suite, upgrades to the athletics, both exterior and interior, upgrade to the auditorium, which has been complete, music suite designed as a FEMA shelter, and then you could see some of the exterior upgrades. All weather turf has been done. I do want to preface, as we talk about both Southeast and the proposed high school, these are starting points. This is the starting point for us to begin to have discussion, to bring you more information if necessary. I do not have a recommendation as such for these, because I do think it warrants your further discussion as we move forward, as well as information that we can bring to you. This is the original plan for Southeast. Enrollment at Southeast is projected, Southeast has fluctuated some. 2008, it was over 1,700, little over 1,700 students. Right now, we're at about 1,626 students. RSP put a projection that it would be somewhere in that mid-1600s as we look forward. Southeast is, while there are approximately 2,100 students that live in the Southeast boundary.
How many?
There's about 2,100 students that reside in the Southeast boundary. You can see that about 1,600 of them are attending. Southeast is our biggest contributor to the IB program, and Northeast Magnet, and then you look at some of the other choices, be it West High. But there's a number of students that do take advantage of the various magnet programs. So you remember, as we went through the bond, the attend, reside, as we look particularly at the high schools, you see a much higher potential reside number versus an attend number, and a lot of that has to do with the choice that's there, as well as the private and parochial options that are available in the community. Again, just starting points. This is what would be had been proposed in the upgrades for Southeast.
Yes, I'm sorry, I was missing. Connie?
I know, I'm sorry. I have a demographic question, and you may have to dig this number out, so that's why I'm going to ask it now. Do we know the income level of students that go to Southeast from the neighborhood, the average household income level? And that may be something we have to ask somebody else for. Or I don't know if that's available somewhere.
There is information, and I do not have that available that we can. I mean, we typically look at the free and reduced lunch ratio, and I was just to give you an idea.
Okay.
Southeast, 187 students last year attended Northeast Magnet. They resided in the Southeast attendance boundary, but attended Northeast Magnet. 249 students that reside, and again, these are all reside in the Southeast boundary. 249 students attended East High School.
Okay.
We had about 49 students in East School. And then you see, say, 13 students at South, 14 students at Northwest. But out of that approximately 2,100 students, you can see where both East and Northeast Magnet have a large number of Southeast students that attend school there.
I guess I would be interested in knowing at a future meeting a little bit more about the demographics of the neighborhood around Southeast. Mm-hmm. I think I'm pretty familiar with it, but I'd like to have a little bit more demographic information just around the neighborhood, if that would be possible.
Sure, and when you say demographics, socioeconomic, and some of those others, for example, as we take a look at current Southeast students,
Okay.
there's about 110 students that live within a half mile of the school.
110?
110, and I can provide this information for you. 214 within a mile, as we think of kind of the radius moving out in half-mile increments. 203 at a mile and a half.
Say that last one again.
203 students at a mile and a half.
These aren't cumulative. It's in that range.
They'd be within those bands.
Yeah.
68 students, 2 miles. Between that 2 mile and 2.5, about 97 students. And then 899 students that live more than 2.5 miles from the current Southeast High School.
So those last ones would be bused?
Potentially.
Would we provide transportation?
Yeah. Out of the 1,600 students, there are roughly 899, 900 that would qualify for transportation currently. So that's about 56% of the student body. They're going to have to. These are estimations because it's difficult to nail this down. There were 247 parking permits issued at Southeast this year. So if each of those with the parking permit, one student drives, that's 247. So that's about 15% of the student population. So right there you've got about 61% of the student population, which leaves 29% that are other. And Mrs. Fuller had asked me a question earlier in the week about, could we gauge how many walk? It's tough to do as we look at those numbers, and I thought, well, okay, so that leaves maybe a 29, 30% that potentially could walk. And then I looked across the dinner table at my own daughter and realized that assumption wasn't correct because she does not drive, so she does not have a parking permit. She would qualify for transportation, but does not consistently ride the bus. Most mornings, it's either a parent drop-off with 2 other students or a carpool situation with another student, and there are between 4 and 5 in that carpool, so that one parking permit is regularly 3 students per that vehicle, and sometimes as many as 5. So that's where I said trying to gauge that is a little difficult. So I'm assuming that number would that actually walk to school on a daily basis would be less than the 29%, because you just think of siblings. One sibling has the parking permit, but there may be 1 or two others, and for some reason Mr. Parks wasn't willing to stand in the parking lot and count heads in cars.
And I'm assuming all the parking spaces are taken. They're usually a pretty hot commodity at most of our high schools.
Southeast is one that actually has some pretty good parking spaces on, and the issue with Southeast is the area that has to be reserved for the buses for Southeast and Curtis as they come in. Okay. But does that give you a little bit of a kind of a demographic of current students as we take a look at it?
Okay. Anything else, Connie? Okay. All right. Cheryl?
Okay, just a quick follow-up because of that 899 number that's more than 2.5 miles away. Do we have any projections on, and I know we haven't gotten to the new high school yet, but since this is here, how many of those would be within walking distance and a mile and a half, 2 miles to our new facility? Do you have those same kind of comparable numbers?
Something we're working on to get those comparisons, and we should be able to do. When it comes to transportation at all, it all depends. It's fluid on decisions we make as we move further through the process. So as you talk about this, and we'll continue to dig deeper in those areas, there'll be kind of a wide range of potential. But as we look at the bands, absolutely, we'll have those numbers for you.
Okay. My real question is on land acquisition for Southeast, because obviously that school is more or less landlocked. Yes, there are 10 acres, but 10 acres isn't going to be able to do the kinds of things that we have said that we will do. So where do we stand with projections on allocations that would be needed for land acquisition?
For land acquisition, exactly. There is acreage, as we saw in the photo and was referenced by one of our speakers earlier this evening. However, that's utilized for PE space, it's utilized for practice space. Southeast already is more limited, particularly now that North is expanding its area. It puts Southeast toward the bottom of that list, particularly when we look at comparable standards and equity. For the expansions to be necessary, when we look at the gym, you look at the pool, upgrading baseball, softball, yes, we would have to look at property acquisition. It's difficult, as we discovered with the North acquisition, to really estimate a cost, and I would be hesitant to do it at this point in time. We know it's probably between 20 and 30 units. Those units are rental. We do know that, and pretty much that entire quadrant is owned by a single entity, so that in this case we wouldn't be dealing necessarily with individuals, but we would be dealing with a company in that acquisition. When you look at rental property, it changes the equation somewhat, as you're looking to, as you also realized in the North acquisition. So as depending on board discussion, we'd be able to factor in some of that, knowing that it's probably going to be a range, but it easily will be probably in the millions.
Like not 1 million, but more than 1 million.
Most likely. It's just until you get into that process, it's difficult. You never know. Maybe the property owner makes a donation to the district. It's happened. So as we move through the process, then we'd be able to better refine that a little bit.
I guess I wanted to add on to that. I mean, if you think about the amount of property that we would need for the things that we're talking about here, I mean, all we have to do is drive around North and see how much of the softball and baseball diamond, which is basically what we have at Southeast, was taken for the new gym and the new natatorium. And then we had to acquire the rest of the space for the other PE. And it is, I mean, that's the big thing. It's used for outdoor PE. And then particularly in this site with Curtis, I think there's a lot of sharing of space back and forth. So they have probably a heavier usage than some of the locations.
As we think about property acquisition, to give you some of the considerations that we look at, it's not just acquiring the tracks. You've got potential utility relocation. In that case, we have to look at, as was addressed earlier as well, yes, there's property available at a price, utility relocation, vacation of the street, and that process that we'd have to go through. You've got potential relocation and moving costs. You have demolition costs. Without having more details about those specific properties, at the time that they were built probably indicates that there's a high likelihood of asbestos, which we also found in some of the properties here at North. That means those properties have to be abated before they can be demolished, which adds time and cost to it. You have appraisal fees, closing costs, all those types of things. So it's not just as simple as, boy, what's a property on the tax roll assessed. There are all those other factors that we'll have to take a look at.
And I think, again, remind board members, if in the past when we and most of our acquisitions were friendly acquisitions until the north. We had to use eminent domain, and that's the first time in my tenure that had to happen. That extended it out, quite a bit. So it really would depend on the local landowner in terms of what they would want to do to make it available. And I guess my concern is that we have been very clear at this board in the past that we try to make sure that the facilities are very equitable from place to place. I mean, that was an original concern here at North. It was a big concern at West. A lot of those places, and even with the changes we had here, there's still schools in our district that have a whole lot more outdoor facilities than North. Same with Southeast, and I don't know how many acres we have at Southeast versus North. Do you? You might have a look at what our sites are. I know.
We'll give you a comparison of the acreage for each.
I'm guessing North and Southeast are pretty close. It probably depends on how you classify Curtis.
For example, our acquisitions at North took us a little over 2 years. Now that's an advantage when you're dealing with the potential of single ownership is that might be reduced some, but until you begin that process, it's just difficult to know.
Barb?
We do not have, or do we have adequate playground space for Caldwell? And as we were talking of the 10 acres and different things, I was under the impression they really didn't have adequate for their student population. Is that my own assumption?
I have yet to find a school that has adequate playground. If it's 10 acres or 20 acres or 30 acres.
You want adequate.
How's the playground space?
The number after 110. I got the rest.
214.
Okay.
Within that mile.
And I notice on this we have tech ed plan, but we don't have it actually named what it's going to be. But we're considering culinary arts in our high schools, right, as a tech ed piece?
Yes.
So at some point, no matter where Southeast is, they would have that opportunity.
I believe we allocated $1 million for each high school for tech ed. Is that correct?
Right, we have, but I don't know that we've spent it in all of them.
No, not until we've actually gotten into the plan of the school.
Right. Is there any way between Caldwell, Curtis, and Southeast to identify families? And I don't know how you do it. Family A, you got 3 at Caldwell, 2 at Curtis, and 1 at Southeast that's going to East High. I mean, to really look what's happening in that area. And then my next thought is, what's the turnover in the schools? I mean, I think these are kind of...
Okay, so
I'm just trying to get a handle on that community.
What you would like is...
And how they use our schools.
Is first following cohorts to see if they go K-12 through the 3 schools. Okay?
That may be very difficult to do.
No, we'll
I mean, if it can be done, it would help us understand what's going on.
It'll take a little bit to do that, but we can. And then your next question was about the mobility rates for those 3 buildings.
Those 3 schools, yes.
Yes.
And just one quick question. I think I heard 13 for South High School. Is that like they're going to the fire science program or something like that?
Okay.
Pretty much with our high schools, our kids can make some choices as long as they're accepted at that other school, is right?
Correct.
Okay.
And it's a program they don't have at their own school.
Right.
So.
Right.
Connie?
Okay. John, I'm a visual person. So is there a way that we could, I mean, I really need to see a picture of the current property and then a sketched in, I don't need details, but like, okay, if we were to add on everything that we're talking about at Southeast, what kind of area would that take in? Mm-hmm. See what I mean? I need to see it visually in order to, because to me, you say 10 acres, wow, that's a lot of acreage. In reality, it isn't. But if you're sitting there and you don't, to me, 10 acres is a lot of space. It's bigger than my property. So,
we can provide that.
So I think if we had a visual, and if you could just lay into that, say, okay, if you did everything you wanted to do at Southeast, here's the current, and here's what the acreage is that it would take out.
There's no problem providing an overlay.
And making sure that we allow for Caldwell and Curtis to have their property too. That has to be built into it, because if we got 100 kids in a tiny little square now because we had to take playground space away from them, and football area, and everything. I mean, it all has to flow together, because you don't want to destroy Curtis and Caldwell in order to take up the space for Southeast. And I know somebody came down this evening and said, well, close, I think it's Pinecrest. I think that's the street. Is that the street?
Yeah.
Close Pinecrest. Well, I don't even know where Pinecrest is. So I don't know what that looks like.
You have to own the houses on the other side.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying, that's what I think it would help me visually if I could just see, okay, this is what the kind of space it would take to do this, what we're talking about. Well, but still allow for Curtis and Caldwell to have their space too.
Wouldn't we also have to add additional parking if we do a 2,000-seat gym? Our city code.
Yeah,
and so we need to make sure that gets added in there as well in terms of what we're really talking about. So that,
We'll have that overlay for you.
Okay.
So that'd be one thing we'll look at next time we come back. So, okay.
And then, may I ask one more
go right
question?
ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Just turn my microphone off and I'll be quiet.
Can you do that?
We can.
She can, sure. They can turn it off.
If you have that switch, I would like one too, please.
Now, be nice. But then I'll keep talking and she'll wave at me up there, so, At what point will you talk to us about optional uses for Southeast High School? At what point will you come to us and say, okay, if you chose to move the students out of there, here are optional uses for that? At what point will you do that?
When we're ready for it. So, as you had the discussion and we walk through tonight, if that's a part of the discussion that you want for our next meeting, I'll prepare that for you.
I think this is where we get into difficulty.
I know.
Because if we don't ask you for it, it's, we're darned if we do and darned if we don't, quite frankly. If you do it and go find those things out, then it's predisposed we're making that decision. And again, I think what we're saying is we just need the information to make an informed decision. There has been no decision, and we can't debate anything until we know what are the options. So
there's been no definitive decision. At your direction, what I can bring you are some of the concepts in trying to do due diligence, and you're absolutely correct, Mr. Rogers. It's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If the due diligence wasn't done in being able to bring some of that to you, it would have been,
they've got a decision made.
How dumb can they be that they didn't think about this before they began the discussion? So that's really where, in trying to do some basic assessment of property values, what are options, looking at what square footage looks like, and how might that be used. Again, there's not A would be this or B would be that, but I can tell you, walk you through that information, some of the concepts potentially that we could pursue if a decision like that was made.
Okay. Anything else? Go ahead. Oh, okay. All of a sudden there's nobody there. All of a sudden there's a bunch. Okay, Connie. I need to pay attention to that. I'm sorry.
Yes, you do. You need to pay attention to that. Oh, anyway, all right.
Can somebody unplug her mouse too if you've got the button?
All right. I'm going to ask a question, and I really don't mean to put you on the spot, sir. I really do not. But so many people came tonight asking about public input in a public meeting. Community, outside of our normal, because anybody can come down here and speak to us at any of our meetings. And I I'm fully aware of that, and I hope everybody else is. But what I heard tonight from many of the speakers is, I think when you're going to come out to the Southeast community and have a community meeting to answer questions and respond, and is there any conversation about doing that? And it's, again, which comes first, because if you don't have answers, if they ask questions and you don't have answers to the questions, then we're sitting out there looking like we don't know what we're talking about. But if we get answers to all the questions, then they'll say, well, you've already made up your mind and made decisions, and you're feeding us what you're going to. So I don't really mean to put you on the spot, but I guess I am.
Well, turnabout's fair play, because absolutely. I mean, as we worked through the boundary process, we went and sought community input.
Yes, we did.
You know, at whatever the direction the board would like to proceed with that, and you are correct. You know, folks get frustrated when they ask questions and you say, well, we're not at that point, I really don't have an answer for you, and you do play that balancing game versus, here are several options, we'd like your feedback about what's positive about this option and this option, this option, and what are some of the issues. So there really, I think, a couple approaches that the board could elect to pursue, and you know, absolutely, as we've done with budget and boundaries, you know, board direction, we've gone to the community and we've gotten their input and been able to bring that back, and you've heard it as you attended each of those boundary discussions, and could bring that into your discussion decision making. So really what I would ask is some direction from the board after you've had an opportunity to look at the information and think about that and how we'll proceed to do that.
And I guess I wanted to do that at the end of all of this, is we have a discussion about that, of how do we want to handle the next few steps. There'll be probably some of these that we can move forward on very quickly, some that we're going to need a lot more time on. And so we need to really look at that and kind of think about our schedule, what we want to do. So we'll have that at the end of this one. Granted, we can't make any decisions, but we can start that discussion process and then try to finalize that scenario over the next couple meetings. Notice I did not say a decision over the next couple of meetings. Thank you very much. All right. Go right ahead.
Any other questions about?
Oh, yes. Cheryl.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask the same thing that Connie just asked, but I think beyond just the community meetings, I think when we have our discussion a little bit later, we want to talk about, because we set up a website where people could send in information and ask questions, and we may want to include that in our discussion at the end, because I think we've got to be able to listen to our community, and I think all of us are willing to do that. We just need to figure out the best way to do so.
Okay, Barb.
One thing I noticed tonight in the speakers, some way we are not getting the communication out on the financial considerations that we have to give in 2013 compared to 2008 when we adopted the bond issue. Well, yeah, right. You understand? And I don't know whether you can buy a billboard and flash it as they drive down the street, but you have been so good about bringing those pieces out, and somehow it's not being accepted as, yeah, we do have a problem here. It's called money. And I don't know, maybe you could get a group of seniors to do a video for us, or YouTube or something. I think students would be better.
I'm not going to go there.
Anyway.
Let's move right along on that one. Okay.
I have a limited window.
2 more months, though. All right, let's go on the next one.
Okay. Then you take a look at the new Southeast Quadrant High School. The original bond plan talked about establishing a high school for 1,800, expandable to 1,200, as well as a new district stadium, track seating for 5,000. There was a comment earlier with our speakers regarding a mega high school. It's the same size under that supposition in the discussion as it would be the current Southeast, 1,600 students to 1,600 students. But as you look at the site, the site that we have it has quite a bit of area, and again, we can do kind of an overlay on how that would look on the site for this one as well. When we think about items for consideration, and this is trying to go back and reflect on some of the questions you had at the last board meeting, hopefully I've tried to address those as we move forward, but when we think about the new Southeast Quadrant High School, first is to take a look at projected enrollment. So we know what that potential range could be. Now, part of the issue when you look at attend and reside is there are platted properties, but not necessarily any new development. So you know over time as new development occurs, it will have an impact on the potential for student enrollment. I think that to Mrs. Fuller's point, that bullet 3 is the key. And I'm going to be pretty straightforward. You can't afford to do the current Southeast from an operations standpoint and open a brand new high school. And folks just assume, well, if you're basically splitting the student population, then just half of everything goes. Well, there are certain staffing FTEs that would move, but when you've got one music teacher, one band teacher, you look at all the supplementals that are duplicated, they can't be split between you. You really look at what's the reality of the additional FTE that would be required, the additional utilities, transportation, all those factors, as well as maintaining the existing. And when we're $199, $200 million difference than where we projected we'd be in 08, 09 to where we are today, that's a huge impact on the organization. I mean, we had to make difficult decisions about schools last year. And as we look at FTE, is there some ability to utilize existing FTE that offsets some of that cost? Yes. But that's also an area we've squeezed pretty tight the last couple of years as we've worked through those budget cuts. But it really comes down to Mrs. Fuller's point, it's about the operation dollars. It's not about the construction dollar, it's about the ongoing long-term operation costs. So the estimate of $10 million needed to operate a new high school if it was added to the system. Again, that number could go up, could go down, depending on decisions that are made. If, say, the board said, we want to do exactly that. We want to open a new high school. We want to maintain the current Southeast. There are just a few ways we can handle that. One, we have to look at our existing budget. We have to start making decisions about programs, services, FTE, class size at all of our high schools. Because without adding or having additional revenue, trying to do it within those FTE, that's would be next to impossible to do to get it appropriately staffed. But I think you could ask any of the high school principals right now, what's their FTE look like? What's their average class size, particularly for core classes? And you can see that's not. There's going to be an impact. There's going to be an increase in class size. There's going to be some other issues. When you take a look at some of the other costs associated with your supplementals, your support staff, you're adding square footage, your custodial, utilities, ground maintenance, all those factors play in. So it really does come back to the real question is, as we've looked at all of these projects as we move forward, and really starting 3 years ago with very difficult budget discussion, it's all about the operation dollars. And that in the end, I think will drive whatever decision and discussion that the board has is around those operation dollars.
Okay. Betty?
Questions on this?
Yeah, I have a couple. John, when you mentioned that we had about 187 students from Southeast that was attending Northeast, was that number impacted by the fact that it was in a new building, or has it always been about that many that have attended Northeast Magnet?
It's been pretty consistent. This year, you remember with Northeast Magnet, we've increased each incoming freshman class, so over really over a 4-year period, we'll be at about 800 students. So if you look at this year's numbers, it's impacted a little up because of that, but it's been pretty consistent over the last 5 years.
Okay. There was another factor that I think is pretty important. When we looked at new attendance sitters last year, you gave us a cost for not using the bond money. And if you don't remember that, that's okay. Maybe you can.
If we we build them and didn't open the schools?
No. For returning the money.
Oh, returning the money.
You gave us a cost. And I just would love it if you would bring that back to us, because that's another thing that has to be factored in, how much cost we would incur for not following through.
I can, because there's still remaining bonds for us to sell, really, in relation to whatever we do with the high school project. So some of that is a bit mitigated. I think the other factor that comes into play is delays, say, in starting construction or waiting. Let's wait until enrollment picks up or development picks up. While the bonding capacity is still there as approved by the voters, your escalation costs are going to have a significant impact on it. So you do reach a point where those costs will make the remaining bonding authority that you have, it won't come close to covering those costs. So then you have to look at how do you fund those other components. But yes, we can take a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
I guess that's my fear. If we don't build the new quadrant high school, and let's say we don't sell the 37 million of bonds, for that, I know we can leave them for so long. I think is it a 10-year window? There's a certain year window, because I know a lot of the suburban and Johnson County districts passed a bond issue and then didn't sell the bonds, and they used them when they needed them, so to speak. So we do that. But I guess my question is we keep
that depends on the bond.
Yeah, I mean, with the Build America bonds and stuff, we may have some
clock started ticking the minute those were.
Yeah, that makes a difference. I guess my question is, what did we anticipate Krista McCullough Academy to open, and what did it open as? Do we know?
I'll have to come back to you on that. I don't have that at my fingertips.
I seem to think that it came in much higher because we attracted a lot of non-public school kids. But I guess my other concern on that is, even if we don't build the new quadrant high school and that area does develop as it's talking about, and RSP talks about it, will we have the capacity for high schools? We won't. I mean, unless we totally revamp move certain ones out of Southeast into East, South, Heights. I mean, it impacts everybody that borders up to Southeast.
Opening a new attendance center will require boundary changes that, in my estimation, without us starting to really deal with that information, will touch a number of the other high school boundaries. It has to, particularly when we want to look at trying to make sure we balance the schools as much as we possibly can. So it's not a matter of a simple split half here, half there. I think we're going to have some definite domino effects with the other high school boundaries.
Well, I think that would be my question: is what would some of that entail, so that we can understand it? Because I do think that's an option. I mean, ultimately, you could put 1,000 in one building and 800 in the other, and then add to it and do different things, particularly if you used more of a tech theme for Southeast. However, there's going to be cost to that too. So, there's just a lot of things to consider.
There's cost to it, and there's also the reality of where students elect to go to school.
Yeah.
When they have choice.
Well, and like you said, if we did
see some typical patterns.
Yeah, if we did do that, we'd have to reallocate all high school students, and every school would have to have a cut, like we talked about last time. So, Connie.
Okay, so this is kind of following on a little bit of what Lynn was talking about. So Southeast currently has a little over 1,600. I think he said 1,626 or somewhere around in there. And we're talking about building a new high school for 800 that could be expanded to 1,200. So let's say we expand it to 1,200. Now, in my math, we're missing 400 kids there. So,
Do you want to move on to your next part?
so have I jumped ahead?
You jumped ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I jumped ahead. Never mind.
Why don't we have you go ahead and continue, and then we'll throw that up, open up afterwards.
As we take a look at the transportation cost impact, really again, until we begin to narrow some of the options, you can take a look at transportation today and extrapolate out, but we're really, and we've discussed as going to need to evaluate our tier. Currently we run with 3 tiers. It may be that we have to look at more than 3. We've talked about, particularly potentially for the secondary, some static stops and those types of things. So there really is a wide range of what the implication for transportation would look like. Then we get into special ed reimbursement and those types of things. So that would be one, as you narrow discussion down, then be able to bring kind of that range of potential transportation impact. The capital outlay funds that have been reduced by $20 million, it does have an impact when we talk about the property acquisition that'll be necessary at Southeast. Because of the loss of equalization, we've been able to offset with some capital funds because we haven't. When you're doing these projects with the schools and you're doing renovations, and it's helped us with some of our overall capital costs, but purchasing the property will have an impact on our capital plan. I mean, because we're gonna have to take dollars away from some of the projected projects. And as I talk of acquisition, we take a look at one of the advantages we have, which in meeting with Kansas and super discussions projects, and I've listened to numbers to comprehensive schools engaging that. We have a very economical in place. That is, to find the southeast quadrant, and in the design with things capacity, but since of that to growth, so you can add yes, you can open it at 1,000 boundaries. To answer your question that I don't understand. Now, really, these are the recommendations, and in retrospect, say, reference numbers. When we take a look at Southeast, you could fill as the new change here. We'll have to purchase things or looking the new site and then repurpose the build before look high school 16 to so you've got the we talked a new center said with look at and ultimately what that would to increase.